All right, here we go. That's it. That's all. Another episode of the Collective Evolution Podcast. Your host, Joe Martino. Hope you're having a good day today. This one we're going to be talking about something that I don't actually know if there's like a full-on official term for or anything like that. For some people, it might be like, oh, it's like the Mandela effect. No, what we're going to be talking about isn't quite like the Mandela effect. What we're going to be talking about is more so like what almost seems like themes, oftentimes talked about in astrology and stuff like that, but themes that like people seemed to experience all at once. And I can't say across the entire globe because I can't really answer that, but I decided to do this podcast because there was a specific theme that I kept hearing from 2017. Like everybody I was talking to, so many people I was meeting, a lot of different businesses that you observe publicly were going through like the same thing. And it was like eerily similar, like unbelievably similar, and it had to do with like literally an upheaval and restructuring of so many things that pulled everything back to what you could call like alignment or something like that. So that's what we're going to be talking about. How it just seemed like so many people went through a similar experience. And I'm going to be sharing the experience that I went through and how others I knew went through a very similar thing, and some of the lessons and the takeaways from it that I think are universally important and something that we can universally reflect on. This is going to be pretty cool. As always, if you want to support this podcast, make sure that it keeps going. Share the podcast if you love it. You know, at the end of the episode, you're like, yeah, this one really moved me. Make sure you share it, pass it out there, do a review on iTunes or something like that. That helps to spread the word and kind of show other people like, hey, this is a good podcast. Not only that, you can support Collective Evolution, our articles, our conscious media, our videos, everything that we do. We have, a team here that we're trying to continue to grow and expand conscious media into the world, because we do know that this is the future of media. Conscious media is the future of where we need to go to create real change. And the way we're supporting our work moving forward is that we are becoming community funded. So you can head on over to that's not correct. You can head on over to explorers.collective-evolution.com /CMM to join our conscious media movement campaign, which is essentially how we're community funding our work, because we know the attack on independent media is pretty intense. Again, we're not, falling victim to it. We're more so just looking at it as, hey, it's happening, and let's go play our game somewhere else, and let's go do this as a community. So that's what we're doing. So if you believe in what we're doing, feel free to support it. But as always, we're going to keep her going. That's it. That's all. All right, let's get into this. Let's get into really what this thing is about. So let me just wheel back to kind of a story. I mean, when I started Collective Evolution in 2009, it came out of just being like super passionate and super excited about everything I was going through in my life. Wanting to share the experiences of how I was breaking down my old thought patterns, my old habits, my ideas, my belief systems, everything that I was kind of fed up until about the age of 20. And I went through a pretty big, not only awakening to what was going on in the world and confirmation of a lot of hunches that I had growing up, but also I went through a big sort of spiritual or consciousness awakening where I was exploring a lot about the world, a lot about who we are, and a lot about who I was. And so Collective Evolution was born out of that. And we were doing a lot of articles and this, that, whatever, about these experiences, talking about ego, talking about deprogramming aspects of ourselves, talking a little bit about what was going on in the world and how we can see that from a consciousness point of view. And as that expanded and we kept doing it, I mean, I spent a lot of the early years just doing majority of it myself, doing a lot of writing, doing a lot of stuff, kind of being the backbone for it. And then eventually it expanded a little bit and we had a few more people. Arjun Walia, for example, came into the mix and he's still with us today. It's like 9 years or eight years. I think 8 years he's been with us now. But, obviously, the more it expanded, the more obviously audience expanded, the more people came into the company, the more attention we got, the more sometimes people wanted things from us, the more opportunity there was to grow yourself through being part of what we were doing and all that sort of stuff. And, it created this experience where ultimately, here we were, super humble. We remained throughout the entire process. We never let any financial success or any, public notary success or anything like that get to us. We never changed. We never faltered. And most of the people who've been with us since the beginning and following us since the beginning have always been true to that. And we always appreciate hearing that feedback, because it allows us to understand that, yes, what we are staying true to in our hearts is showing on the outside. Like when you live these truths deeply, it shows and it illustrates, and it helps to influence others, to give them the permission, like, yeah, we can all do this. This is how we, can be living. And so regardless of the fact that we stayed really true, I had a specific aspect of myself that I was having challenges with. And it really sort of came to head in like 2015, 2016, when I had always had this sort of like inability to deal with, and a lot of people have this, aspects of what you could call conflict, or having to, talk to someone about something, or, some people call it confronting someone, even though it doesn't have to be angry or violent or anything like that. It doesn't have to be confrontational, but it's what people call it, having to sit someone down and say, hey, this is what bothers me. This is what I feel, or here's what's going on. I had issues doing that, because somewhere in my programming and the way I felt and the way I grew up and all that sort of stuff, I shied away from wanting to do that and from feeling comfortable doing that. I worried that people weren't going to like me, which very easily could have related to my elementary school days, my high school days, where, the fact that I didn't sort of fall into some of the trends that were happening at that time, suddenly I became a very disliked person in the school, and all that sort of stuff sort of happened. But perhaps I was protecting myself later in life from experiencing the, fact that people wouldn't like me, and people suddenly just, I was kind of, I wouldn't say public enemy number one, but I was a public enemy to people. Not because I was a bad guy, but because I just didn't do what everyone else was doing. And, I'm perhaps later in life, I was afraid to re-experience that. And so I avoided confronting people. I avoided talking to people about stuff, how I felt, because I was afraid they were either going to get hurt, or they were going to feel like I was a bad person, or they were going to have something against me and all that sort of stuff. So, I had this story running, and I recognize a lot of people have this story too. And it's something that, we all seem to struggle with, is sort of setting up some level of boundaries at times when we need to. And so here we were running Collective Evolution, making quite a bit of financial success, and that allowed us to do a lot of different things, right, at the time. This was in 2015, 2016. And because it allowed us to do a lot of different things, a lot of people wanted to come in and be part of that, right? So like one of the particular desires that I always had, which came from this feeling within myself that we needed to create a space for the collective to realize what was possible, to realize that they could come to a retreat space and not only explore possibility, but explore themselves deeply and authentically, and do so in a way that was entirely sober as well, which was something that just spoke really true to me, really deeply to me. And so my vision was to, and this I think was coming as early as 2013, 2014, was to create a space, create a facility, if you will, where you could run intimate retreats between 14 and 20 people, maybe 30 at most, where you could, explore consciousness. You could be around incredible nature. You can do healing sessions on aspects of yourself that you're having difficulty with, whatever it may be. We would explore consciousness deeply, and we wouldn't do it through a way where it's about, throwing affirmations at it, or, just sort of willing our challenges away, but actually getting to the core, taking away the bullshit, to be honest, of, what's going on out there. Like, so many people will be like, oh, if I feel a lack of confidence, then I'll just simply tell myself I'm confident all the time. It's like, well, hold on a second. Confidence isn't even real. It isn't a thing. When you have a lack of confidence because you're telling yourself a story that is harming your ability to recognize and be empowered within your true self. So instead of trying to cover up your lack of confidence with something like a Band-Aid, like affirmations, or like trying to tell yourself you're just confident, instead you remove the story. where you keep telling yourself you're not confident. And once you remove that story, the rest of the work is done. There's nothing else to do. And so this was the approach we wanted to bring into things. And, a lot of this approach was fueled from how I shifted and how I changed through my journey of exploring and learning and growing, which I learned a lot through, my mentor, who's Franco De Nicola, and who we're now actually doing a show with in CETV called Elevate. So if you're not a member of CETV, be sure to check that one out because it's an incredible show. We're going to be diving super deep into consciousness and all that sort of stuff within this show. Really exploring, again, cutting through the bullshit, but really exploring the depth of what's going on here and how we as beings are obviously, conscious beings and we can look at our world through that manner and really just explore things in a really deep manner. And these are the conversations I had back when I was first starting a lot of this journey. But essentially, as I was, having these visions for this space, I also saw that it's like, hey, I also love to find a way to include off-grid devices, showing people that it is possible to live a modern lifestyle in a modern home that's completely off-grid, and that allows us to collect water if we wanted to, grow our own food if we wanted to. At the time, I was very inspired by earthships, but I wanted them to be modern. I wanted them to be more comfortable in people's perspective of moving from the houses we live in today to these types of houses that are off-grid without losing any of the major amenities or losing the aesthetics that people love and enjoy. So on this facility, we were also going to showcase a lot of that stuff and showcase potential, and then create sort of packages that are free and open source that allows people to recreate what we've created there elsewhere. So these ideas could spread. And this was an idea that was so clear to me, and it was so based on serving the collective. This wasn't about me. This wasn't about collective evolution. This wasn't about selfishness or anything like that. And that was the vision. And eventually, something came along, or someone came along, who seemed to have a very similar vision. And, we started having meetings, we were chatting, and it seemed very exciting. It was like, yeah, this is awesome. We can do this together. And, to be totally honest, I had, through a lot of our success in CE at the time, I had saved up a lot of money because it was going to go towards this type of project. This wasn't about, the people at CE driving fancy cars and living in, not that that's wrong, but that's not what we were here to do. That's not what our journey is. It's not about, we're going to live comfortably, we're going to do what we need to do, but I'd rather take that money and keep evolving this collective, keep moving it forward, because that is what inspires me. That is what's important to me. So that's the path that I took. And so we had a lot of money ready for this. And this individual wanted to come in as a partner and be part of the center. And at the time, they had a contracting company, and they'd be able to sort of help with some of the construction end of it because there was some knowledge there. And it's like, hey, this sounds like a great partnership. And they had a similar vision. So we started looking for land and going through a lot of different things. And we spent about a year and a half scoping out a piece of land. And eventually we got it. And it was like amazing. It was such a great feeling, great experience. And by the time we started realizing, okay, so we're gonna do some renovations on this place. And you got to understand, at this point, I had put in 75% of the whole ownership of the place. I owned I guess you could say it was through CE ultimately, but since it was me making the decision, you could say that it was my decisions that were owning this place in a sense. And again, ownership really is, just to stay clear on this land was not here. This retreat center was not here for me to be the owner of it. It was for me to be the steward of it. This is how I always viewed it. It was to help steward a situation and set up a state of being, a state of harmony within a place that people could come into and feel and transform and shift. And, not to spoil the whole thing, but what I learned later on is the partner was not there for that. The other business partner that I had. And so I kind of went through this journey of having to sort of watch my vision. And again, it's not my vision. This was a collective vision. This was something that was coming through as a greater collective service. But I had to watch me as the steward of that sort of let that fall away. Because I was too afraid to speak up and do what I needed to do. And so here we are, we have the place, and I have, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars that I've put into this place, and we're going through renovations now, and after we tear everything down and everything's still going great at this point, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, it's time for some of the rebuild of the inside, and redoing the floors and redoing the walls and redoing all the stuff and everything. And I kind of heeded a little bit to the to my partner, because he had a lot more construction background, even though I had a lot of it myself too. But he had a company, and I felt he had contractors and people to work with. And long story short, on that end, it kind of seemed like everything was being rushed. There was no vision. There was no time to say, hey, how can we create a beautiful space? How can we make sure this turns out proper? How can we make sure that it aligns with all of the rules and guidelines, if you want to call them that we had set up? Use as harmonious products as we possibly can. Make sure that things are done in a manner that provides a good energy, something that is going to allow people to really be inspired and to feel and to sort of get lost in the space in a deep particular way and really explore consciousness. And that all, for lack of a better term, and I take responsibility for a lot of this too, that all just went to the wind, because as I kind of heeded again and was always told that, yeah, no, everything's fine, it's under control, time after time I kept seeing, well, that wasn't done very well, or that wasn't done as we discussed, or that decision was made without me, or where the hell did all the money go, or all these things started to happen. And instead of me saying what I needed to say, I kind of stayed quiet. I kind of just went, yeah, okay, and I, because I was always afraid. I was afraid to step in and say, I don't want to be a guy that looks like the dictator here, or I don't want to be the guy that's like, okay, well, I have, 75% of the money and therefore I need to make all the decisions. I wanted it to be a collective thing, but what really I was doing in fear of all that was allowing someone who had different intentions that I did on this project to sort of just go and do what they needed to do. And it was perfect for me to create this space that would ultimately allow me to have like a somewhat of a breakdown, if you will. Not that it's probably what you're picturing in your head, but ultimate breakdown where I hit a breaking point and said, I can't deal with this anymore. But this just kept continuing. As we moved through the renovations, it was like more and more things happened where I'm like, wow, I'm not happy with this. Well, this isn't what I wanted. This isn't even what I said. This isn't what I was told. I don't understand. Why am I being lied to? Why am I being deceived? But then at the same time, I need to speak up. But why am I not speaking up? Why am I afraid to speak up? And at the time, there was later on, there was another partner who sort of came into the mix for a little bit. And he even left because he couldn't deal with the partner in question, because he couldn't deal with the way the person was and the way they were operating. And I remember them warning me, saying, if I were you, I would get out immediately because this is going nowhere good. And I'm like, I was sort of, yeah, we'll work this out. This person will change. They'll realize that they're operating from ego, or they'll realize that they're being selfish, or they'll realize that they're taking advantage of the situation, whatever it is. It's okay. I have patience. I feel like it'll work out. And I kept telling myself that. I kept going through this experience, and it got worse and worse and worse. And then all of a sudden, I started hearing from people like, oh, you got to watch out for this guy. This happened, that happened. He's telling everybody he owns the place and not you, and this, and all these stories. And whether or not every single one was true is not the purpose here. The point is an environment was being created where within myself, I knew that this wasn't going as the vision that I had within myself that was coming from an overall collective vision. This was not happening. And I was letting it not happen by not saying something. And that in a sense, I was sort of tasked with this opportunity in life to say, hey, here, take on this experience and go through this. And it's going to allow you to work through some of your stuff. And, you're one of the individuals that can steward this place and make sure it maintains authenticity and maintains the vision and doesn't go south. But do you have the balls ultimately to stand up and do it? And, I've typically never had issues doing anything like this in life. Like collective evolution was always easy for me to stand up for it and do what I needed to do and, make sure it stayed on track. But with this particular project, it touched a specific point within myself that really shone light on the challenges that I had. And so from the outside, people started to look at it and everyone was warning me. my parents, my friends, my family, random people that I wouldn't know, that I would mention the name of my partner and they would be like, oh, you need to be careful, or you need to watch out. And I'm like, am I the only one that feels it's possible that this thing's going to turn around? Like, what's going on? Right. And I got to be clear here, because this is one of the lessons, number one, and something that personally I've always been good at, but not everybody is. And I do want to bring it up, because just because like someone is doing something that doesn't seem favorable for anybody does not mean they're a bad person, or does not mean that they're doing something that you could even classify as wrong. We play roles for one another. And that's the basic truth. How was I going to learn my lesson of learning to speak up and say what I needed to say if I did not agree to enter into a partnership, even if it was on a deeper level? If I did not agree to enter into a partnership with someone that ultimately was going to challenge me to find this part of myself. And it was interesting, because there was many points throughout this journey where it was like, he would even say like, hey, is there anything else you need to say? Is there anything else you need to, share? And I wouldn't. And it was like, I knew he knew, or I knew that a deeper part of him knew, and he opened and he gave me the space, but I didn't say it. And that's on me. Right. And so every time in life when we're quick to want to just say, oh, this person's bad, or this person's just evil, or this person's just this, cut the bullshit. Find out why they're in your life. Find out what's going on. Find out what's happening. Empathize with where they're at, and then make a decision based on a state of peace. Even if someone is abusive, physically abusive in a relationship, your first step may be, all right, I got to remove myself from the abuse. And then I got to be able to empathetically look at them and say, why is it that they're committing this? How might I be able to help them end that cycle by providing a bit of feedback that isn't based on you're an abusive piece of shit, but instead is based on, hey, you're abusive. It doesn't really feel that great. And even if you do this from a phone, or you do this with an office or president, whatever it takes, right? We got to begin to look at difficult situations in life and be able to say, hey, this is what you need to hear. And it's got to be something that's reflective, that allows people the space to understand why they're doing what they're doing. And not everybody, and we're going to get to that in my story, but not everybody's going to take it right away and make a change right away. But the seed will be planted, and we have to trust that it will continue to grow and continue to evolve until that person, because again, if we just keep hating the person, keep holding resentment, keep holding all this stuff, which is something that I personally didn't do, but I could have very easily did. I mean, for a couple of months, I was pretty upset after the eventual, I guess, breakup of the situation. But I knew that having any sort of resentment or anything wouldn't go anywhere. And most of the resentment I had was actually about myself, But we got to begin to look at situations like that. So, here we were. I've had plenty of opportunity. I mean, the other partner who came in for a short period had said, you got to get out. And I was like, no, it'll be okay. And, then there's people saying all these stuff, and I'm like, okay, it's in my face. It keeps coming up. What am I going to do? And it was one event after another, one thing after another that would happen that would throw it in my face to say, hey, you got to do something about this. And I kept just ignoring it, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse. Now, here's where the kicker comes in. I could have, in year one, right? I could have said, you know what? I got to nip this in the butt, and I should say what I needed to say, because I had all the grounds to say it very early on. And it may have shifted and done whatever it needed to do, but I didn't. I just kept letting it go on until it eventually pretty well drove me crazy. And I had to do the thing I was most afraid to do, and it was say how I felt and what I needed to say. But the reality is I didn't say everything. I only said part of it. And the funny thing is that the initial thing I said, okay, you know what? Here's how I feel. I don't really like this situation. I don't like where it's going. Either I'm out, you're out, or we sell the whole place. And it sort of moved to, okay, I'll keep it. That's what he had suggested. And I said, okay, great. To me, from a logical perspective, it didn't make any sense, because what the place was set up to do was not really in his wheelhouse of delivering that type of energy, that type of content, that type of whatever, right? And again, it was just because we're at different places. His I got passion, in my view, at the time, so much better fitted what he's actually doing right now, which is helping people on a lifestyle level with aspects of health and loosely touching on some consciousness stuff, which is beautiful because that's where he's at as an individual at this moment in time in his journey. But because for him, it was a different experience. Because again, I not only learned from this, but he's going to learn from this experience. But for him, it was like part of his journey was learning that he's got to get out of his ego. He's got to get out of his head. He's got to start realizing that this is about everyone and not about himself. And we all go through this in some way, shape, or form, some of us more extreme than others. So here it was where he's like, well, I'm going to keep the place. And that was just his ego, not listening to his heart, not following what his heart was saying, which was really an opportunity for him to get out, get a chunk of money, and go put it into the place that he's doing. Instead, he's like, well, I'm going to hold on to the place, and I'm going to have to pay out a whole bunch of money to Collective Evolution, to Joe, because, I got to buy out their ownership stake in it. That's something that's not even doable, not even plausible. And so here we are going through this journey, and I've kind of started to let go of the place because he was going to accept it. I'm feeling an immediate relief on my shoulders, and I'm like, oh, this feels so much better. I've said what I needed to say. I knew there were some things I still needed to say, but, I was kind of like, oh, okay, no problem. And, as I'm letting it go, I'm like, it feels like it's just going. It feels like it's kind of just happening, but it wasn't happening fully. But because I was so overwhelmed before, I couldn't really feel the detailed nuances of what was still sticking around quite yet, because it was very intense and it was very fresh. And, for me to express how intense this was, like, it was intense. Like, it was just so in my face. It was happening all the time. It was so difficult to deal with. There was hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line. There was, tens of thousands of dollars that were wasted, thrown down the drain. And it's just, this is stuff that was earned and was taken care of through the work we were doing at CE, which in my view has always been about reinvesting back into humanity as a whole so that we can continue to do this work and continue to evolve. And I'm watching it just kind of get wasted on silliness and bad decisions and me not speaking up and all this sort of stuff. So it was very intense for me. And eventually it got to a point where I was like, yeah, I'm letting it go. And I remember having a conversation. We were walking out by the office, and Ruby was with me, and Franco, my mentor, was with me again from the show Elevate there that we're just releasing shortly. But he had said, he's like, so how do you feel about it all? And I'm like, I feel good. I feel good that I said something. I feel good that it's kind of going in a direction. And he goes, I'm going to be straight up. I'm like, he can't keep the place, right? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, the energy of the place, the actual land, the place in general, the intention that it initially had, that you had tuned in with in the beginning, that energy will not allow him and where he's coming from and what he's doing to stick around. It will toss him out. And I'm like, get out of here. I knew exactly what he was saying, and I totally believed in that. But in my mind, it was already a done deal. It was like, I'm letting him have it, and he's going to get the money he needs, and he's going to buy me out, and that'll be it, right? And he was like, no, it won't let him. And I'm like, okay, thanks for that. I appreciate that. I understand where you're coming from. I don't know what else. I don't know what to say to that. And so after a couple of months of him attempting to get sort of the financing to buy out my portion, he eventually came back. This is a couple months later, saying, hey, I can't get the financing. Do you want the place instead? And I was like, holy shit. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, this is really coming back. Like, I have an opportunity. And this, I skipped a piece a little bit here, but with the negotiation process of determining a price that for the buyout was also a very difficult process. It started off very amicable, but it started to become the essence, the height of what his ego and what his state of being was, which was in extreme, I guess you could say, selfishness, and extreme, it's all about me. And so I wasn't even entirely happy with where the buyout was going. I was going to lose a lot of money on the situation because in his view, it was like, it was all him. It was all about him because, again, he only saw his world through his eyes. He can never see the world through other people's eyes. That was one of the challenges he had, and something that he learned through this experience, I hope. But again, something that I don't hold against, and it's something that we shouldn't hold against people in general, but more so recognizing where they're coming from and how each of us grow and evolve through a situation. So here I am, difficult negotiation process that happened. I'm not happy with the price, but hey, at least it's going to be over. And so then I find out it's coming back, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's coming back. You got to be kidding me. This is crazy, and it's interesting because the whole experience kept kicking around. It kept staying around. It kept staying around because I had also, one, the energy wasn't going to allow him to stay there, that we knew. And two, I had not finished saying everything that I needed to say. I didn't finish expressing everything I needed to express. And so the situation still stuck around. Again, things don't disappear. Things don't move from our lives. Things don't fully move on. We keep repeating the same cycle until we finish learning what we need to learn from the situation. Important thing to remember. So here we are. I now have an opportunity to get the place back. And I'm like, holy, yeah, you know what? This feels totally right. And I did want this, and I am passionate about this, and we can make this an event space that we want. And, this can really be it. So I take him up, sure, no problem. And I decided, you know what? Whatever deal, because we made a deal where I was going to get a certain amount based on what he thought was fair. So I said, sure, we'll just flip the deal so that it's like, now I give you what you thought was fair. And he's like, no, I need more. I need this. I need that. And he was fighting, basically saying like the deal that we had initially was fair, but not if it was the other way around. And so we went through that whole journey. And this is where all the manipulation started, all of the guilt tripping, all of this, all of that, which was, again, a classic thing that had happened over the years. And because I don't say anything, it went on. And so here we were now negotiating again. And eventually I had to just say everything I needed to say. I had to put it all on the table. I needed to express. And even though I knew that it was difficult for me to say, because everything I needed to share was pointing out the aspects of him that I really appreciated and the aspects of him that I thought he really needed to reflect on. And this is exactly how I worded everything in the email. It was all, because I chose at a point to no longer speak with the person because it was just a sheer and utter manipulation and guilt trip every time that we would talk. It was like I got tired of speaking to one person at one point, and then he'd be a completely different person at another point. And so I never knew which person I was going to meet up and speak with. I never knew whether or not I was being manipulated or whether, you knew, but I never knew which individual I was going to be meeting with. So I just decided, you know what? I'm going to say my bit. I'm going to send her an email, and that's going to be it. And that's going to be no more from there, right? So ideally not the way to end a situation, but because we had so many conversations beforehand, this was just where it led. So ultimately, I say what I need to say, and I get a thank you email ultimately, like, you know what, thank you, I appreciate you saying what you needed to say there, and this, that, whatever, and I put it all on the table, and that was great, and I was glad that he was able to see it from that manner, and I think it was, the sort of what ultimately this whole dynamic was waiting for, was that aspect of it, and so here now I was starting to look for financing to buy out his small portion, which was a lot easier for me because it was a smaller portion I was looking to get, right? It was much more manageable. So here, here I am going about doing this process. Of course, it takes time because banks are slow as shit. Everyone knows that. So it's taking time. And right as we're about done, we're at my family's, my parents' place, and we're celebrating Ruby's birthday, although it's not Ruby's birthday at the time. And I get a text message. And it's, hey, I got the financing for the place. I'll take it, and I'll put $5,000 down for you right now, and it'll be done. And I'm like, I sent him a text message back. I said, hey, dude, like, sorry, it's already a done deal. We're going to be closing our financing very soon. Like, this isn't happening. And then the guilt tripping started again. All the text messages. Oh, is this really what you and Collective Evolution stand for? Blah, blah, blah. All these different little things, right? And I'm like, wow, this is still happening. This is still going on, right? Like I'm still being treated in this manner. This is interesting, right? So I decided, okay, here's a test, right? I've said everything I need to say. Am I willing to continue doing it? So here's a test. So I said, okay, you know what? I feel like you're manipulating me. I feel like you're doing this because you're trying to get what you need to get. We've already made the decisions. We've already put in a lot of legwork. We've already pulled out some finances from where we needed to pull it out. A lot of stuff is in place. A lot of stuff is done. I'm sorry, but this is how it has to be, and this is where it's going. And I said that. And then he kept going a little bit more, and then it kind of just stopped. And that was that. And the situation was pretty well diffused from there. And, you know, the thing went on. Eventually we got the financing, we closed on the place, we had his money, and we moved on. And as a further test, I mean, there were some items that were missing, that were lost, that were damaged, and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, I decided, hey, you know what, I'm going to speak up and I'm going to go after some of those items. So we went after some of those items too. But even still, we knew going into it that the amount of, you could say, quote unquote, damage that was done to the place, irresponsible spending, like so much money missing, really, really poor construction on a lot of the places, a lot of stuff that we had to redo. We knew that it was a loaded bag going back into it and saying, we got to make this how we initially intended and how we wanted it to feel. So we knew going into it, it was like, hey, you know, this is what it's going to be. This is what's going to have to happen. And energetically, there was going to be a lot to clean up, because although we had said, hey, I had said one of the rules, no substances at this place. This is going to be a place where we truly face ourselves. And while I think ayahuasca and mushrooms and stuff like that can be helpful for people, I have nothing against that. And people can go to other retreat centers and explore that. That's entirely up to them. If you feel guided to do that, if that's in your journey to do that, by all means do that. But that is not the instructions, the feeling, the intention I was given to create in this space. But this was one of the challenges, is none of the rules that I had set forth and that we agreed on were followed, because there was no respect towards what I felt, right? And this was part of the reason why the whole relationship broke down, was just because it was like, you know what, fuck it, I don't care. We're going to do mushrooms anyway. Okay, we're going to do ayahuasca anyway, even though they didn't, but they did iboga, and they did all these different things, because it was always about making a quick buck or making an event happen or whatever it may be. And it's not to say that there weren't some pure intentions. It's just they were very much shadowed by the individual wanting to be the guru, wanting to be the one everything centers around, right? And for me, you know, I don't mind if there's someone else who's the cock of the walk, if you want to call it that. It doesn't bother me, but it's got to be done authentically, and it's got to be done in alignment with the energy and what we're trying to create. So we knew there was a lot of energy to clean up, and Ruby and I spent a lot of time cleaning up a lot of energy there and going through and doing a lot of stuff, and really making the place, and we're still working on it, making the place what it was initially intended. And soon we'll be opening it back up for events. We've done a couple little sweats here and there at the place for Sweat Lodge, but we want it to be where it needs to be when we open it back up. And so that'll happen next year. We'll be opening it back up for events, and it'll be an incredible space as it was initially intended. But that experience was a journey that was hugely important for my personal growth, and going through the experiences, as I had said, and being able to look at it and say, look, there was no right or wrong. Joe or his partner, there was no right or wrong. It was the experience they both needed to have. And everyone got what they needed to get out of it. And now they move forward, and are they going to implement what it is that they learned? That's the question. That's what you have to focus on. That's what you have to observe. And you don't hold grudges. Well, you can. It's up to you. But ask yourself, where does a grudge lead? You know, do you have freedom if you still are triggered by other people? Not really, right? The only person who can get rid of the trigger is yourself. So you can't set up rules saying, oh, this person can't call me this. Like, you know, a lot of the classic activism in modern world today is all about, oh, let's set up rules so that this person can't say this person can't do that, this person can't do this. You set up all these barriers so that we can protect our own insecurities or our own feelings, because we're too afraid to look at them ourselves. So we point at everybody else, right? That's not what this is about. This is about us looking at ourselves, not blaming people, to truly live that. And to not just talk about it as a concept, is when you're put in the situation like I was, to be able to live it, to be able to actually come through the other side and stay living it. And I've spoken to so many people about this story who have asked me, because they were close to the experience, and they asked me questions, or they heard, for lack of a better word, shit talking on the other side. And I said, look, I don't care what was said. Here's the story. Here's how I feel. I don't blame anybody for anything. We all played our part in this, and that's it. That's all. And people will say, hey, you know, I can't believe you live that truth so much. No one would be like that. And I said, well, first of all, a lot of people can be like this, and a lot of people choose to live this true to the message. But for those who don't, this is a way to inspire people. They need to realize that this is what it takes to live the truth of this conscious message that has been shared for such a long time, that we don't bend the rules just because someone does something to us or just because something happens. There's always a way to continue to change the situation so that it's not dangerous, so that nothing bad is happening, all that sort of, without being extreme about it. And this is a lesson that we have to learn as a collective, and we're going through. And where this ties into the whole title, I guess, of this thing is, I heard about 5 or 6, maybe even 7 other people, just people that I randomly met, who went through in 2017 the exact same experience. Some of the details that people went through were exactly the same as I went through. Like exactly to the T. It's almost scary how accurate it was. Not only that, but I saw it happening in other ways on businesses and this, that, whatever, where ultimately the shared phenomenon experience that was happening through the collective in 2017 seemed to be about people. If there was something that wasn't in alignment, if there was 2 people that were not supposed to be on each other's paths, if there was, someone who was, I'm trying to say, like, perhaps living a more authentic life, if you will, or state of being, and the other person was there but wasn't really meeting at that level, things were pulled apart. Things were, boom, okay, go on your separate paths now. Learn what you need to learn, move on your separate paths. That seemed to be this incredible shift in experience that I saw, where people were weeded out of situations. If you did not align with someone or with some group that was trying to really raise consciousness, really move to the next level, you were somehow weeded out. I watched it happen so much in 2017. It was incredible. And I heard so many people share that experience. And so I thought to myself, from a collective consciousness perspective, this is really inspiring, because what this allows us to see is that something is continuing to build in a big way, where if you weren't doing something from an authentic place within yourself, you were challenged in a very deep way to be pulled out of it. Or it was just you were just kind of booted out. Like, not in a way where it's like, oh, you don't belong here, you're booted out, we're overtaking your power. It's not that so much that. It's more so from a deeper, bigger picture perspective. Are you living authentically? Are you doing what you need to be doing? Are you potentially, are you an ingredient that's holding things back in a certain situation or in a certain group or in a certain state of being, whatever it may be? If so, then the energy seemed to create this rumble that pulled people apart and that pulled people out of situations. I'm not going to say that there was particularly a lot of individuals involved in CE that didn't really belong energetically. I would more so say that in 2016 and so forth, maybe even a little bit of 2017, there were some individuals that it was kind of like there was just a feeling like, I'll say this, not everybody who left didn't belong per se, but some of the people, a couple of the people that ended up leaving as a result, were they did not belong in the overall energy of what we were doing here. I was too afraid to say stuff. And they may have been too afraid to do what they needed to do, but that the energy was just not there. And something worked out, even regardless of what I needed to do, that just kind of pulled it apart. That just kind of like said, boom, get out of here. Not in a bad way, not like, oh, get out of here. It was more like, okay, we need to align things. We need to pull things together in a lot of different situations. That's going to create this space because something big is going on here. Something big is happening. And it's coming to a bit more of a climax. I'm not saying the climax is now. I'm saying it's coming to a bit more of a climax where things need to be in place in a really aligned and authentic way. And we need to be open to that. We need to create that. And 2017 did that in a big way. And it was interesting because as soon as here at CE, we started to, and I shared this through a lot of the email updates I've been putting out over the past almost 20 weeks now. The more things got into alignment, certain people left and new people came in, and those new people were super aligned with what we're doing. Anything that was kind of stale or anything that was kind of weird or didn't belong just kind of was just like poof, gone. And the energy is incredible now. And while, certain challenges were around and a lot of people were experiencing them, we suddenly were no longer experiencing them because the energy was aligned and things were in the right space. But there was a lot of learning that everybody involved had to go through that experience. And that's why this is kind of, again, this is the important thing, is really reflecting and looking at, regardless of these experiences, being able to say, whatever was pulled out of alignment, like, okay, for example, let's take it back to the early meetings that I had with my partner where everything seemed great. Wow, this guy's aligned. He has the same vision as I do, all this sort of stuff. Why did I intuitively feel that this was the right thing to keep doing? Some people would look back and say, oh my gosh, you missed it. You didn't realize that, he was inauthentic since the beginning or whatever. Someone might say that. And I go, well, no, because I wasn't supposed to see it. Because if I saw that, who was going to come along and provide me the journey of challenging me to understand that I need to speak up and I need to learn to go through that? We don't always see things super, super, super clearly, or we see things in a particularly clear way at the beginning, because regardless, that's part of our journey. We can't look at our journey as we always make the quote unquote right choice and nothing bad ever happens. That's not what this is about. This is about us checking off a list of the things that we're here to learn, grow, and do in this particular lifetime. And so that means at times we're going to think something's absolutely great and it's going to be great. And we're going to hear exactly what we need to hear. And then we're going to find out later, hey, you know what? I actually am now able to go this path, or I'm able to do this. And I never really wanted that, but I knew I needed it to be that way, even intuitively, because that was the path I was on. That's where I needed to be. So I was in the right place at the right time, even though it turned out to be bad. And again, or quote unquote bad. And so, even my parents, sometimes they looked at it and they were like, it's like, from a parent point of view, it's like, you should never have done that. We warned you from the beginning, this, that, whatever. It's like, it wasn't my role to see that, I wasn't supposed to do this, because I was supposed to do this. I was supposed to go through this challenge. And that's exactly how I saw it. I didn't miss anything. I saw exactly what I needed to see, and I came through the other side and went, yeah. On the flip side, there are other times where I'm presented with an opportunity and I intuitively know this isn't right for the situation. This isn't right for what we're doing. And we don't do it. And a couple weeks later, we're like, see, we knew that wasn't the right thing to do, quote unquote, right thing. You know what I mean? Right? So again, these are things to reflect on. I'm still sort of fascinated by this phenomenon of how everyone seemed to have this shared experience of just being pushed into alignment. Anything that wasn't in alignment, so many things were just pushed. Figure out the alignment. 2017, so much of that happened. It was incredible. Again, the details of the stories I heard, like I'm talking about, like I've heard stories of people, they were in the exact same situation. They had the exact same percentage split in the business. They had the exact same tactics that the other person was doing, that I went through and experienced. They had the exact same situation where they were going to give up the company, then they came back and then they were going to buy out the company. Like I'm talking like just unbelievable, some of the stuff that I had heard. Now, of course, I'm probably attracting to some level the same sort of experience, same sort of person I can chat with. But in general, it was incredible to see the amount of companies even that were having existential thoughts about, what do we really want to be? Are we aligned with our roots? Do we really want to do this? This happened in such a big way in 2017. So I look at that and I call that just like this shared collective phenomenon of we're pushing towards this being more authentic, and we're having a harder time resonating with and being around that which isn't truly aligned with us. And that's not to say this is bad and I got to avoid it and I got to get that out of my frequency and all this like woke ass shit that people start saying, get that out of my all that stuff is like, it's the same judgment. Oh, that's bad. I don't want that shit in my life. Being able to see, hey, being able to truly step back and observe, well, I'm not aligned with that. And that's it. There's nothing more. We don't need to color it beyond that. Because when we start coloring it beyond that, you start seeing people get back into the ego traps, right? I'm sure some of those movements I just did look pretty comical on camera, but if you listen to this, I mean, you can enjoy the comical movements on YouTube, but no big deal. But yeah, I mean, hope this was a good one, Hope this was a good, I felt good sharing a lot of that stuff, talking about a lot of that stuff, because again, there was a lot of learning through that experience, and a lot of this is going in the book that I'm working on, because there's just there's incredible stuff that was learned through what was one of the most challenging year and a half, actually was the most challenging year and a half of my life. But it was incredible. It was great to go through it. And I even said that at times going through the experience, at times when I would come out of some of the mind mess, I'd be like, oh, this is amazing. And then I go back into the mind mess, But yeah, we can't Can't blame others. It's not what this is about, right? This goes all the way up to not blaming the cabal. This is reality of the situation. In a lot of ways, we are collectively allowing the cabal to be. And I just did another video you can check out on YouTube called The Antidote to the Cabal. And that one will ultimately talk about what I just said there in a more deeper detail. But thanks again for listening to this podcast, and hope you enjoyed it. And if this resonated with you, if this hit home, if this felt right, feel free to share it, leave a review, rate the podcast on iTunes, all that sort of stuff truly helps. And if you want to support this podcast, you want to support Conscious Media, you want to support everything that we're doing here at Collective Evolution, you can do so by heading over to explorers.collective-evolution.com/CMM, or going to our menu page, a menu on collectiveevolution.com and hitting donate. And you can donate to our Conscious Media Movement campaign, which supports everything that we're doing. And it basically, we show all the transparency of everything that goes on here at CE in terms of finances and what our intentions are, what we're going to be doing coming up and where our money goes, all that sort of stuff. And ultimately, you're supporting the prevalence of this type of media. You're supporting bringing these types of concepts into world events, being able to look at our world and what's going on in our world from a conscious lens, which truly will help people, which truly will create change, which truly will shift the consciousness that will pull away a lot of the power into the stuff that in the world that simply doesn't resonate with us anymore, right? We can't keep doing this through standard media or even a lot of independent alternative media that is still very polarized. It's not going to work. So thanks again for listening. Thanks for being part of this podcast and, uploading incredible experiences to the collective consciousness. We'll catch you next time.